Mr. Coburn.
Coburn here.
Mr. Grimsley.
Grimsley here.
Mr. Freimiller.
Freimiller here.
Mr. McCowan. Mr. Dyson.
Dyson here.
Mr. Alexander.
Alexander here.
Mr. LaForge.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Here. Up next is the presentation of Oklahoma Asphalt Pavement Association Award winners. Secretary Gatz, you are recognized to present.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. The Department of Transportation certainly prides ourselves in delivering quality work and working closely and carefully with our contracting community to make sure that that happens. And our partners in construction and the teams that we have do our work are outperform constantly. So again, we've got the best in the business. We're very fortunate in Oklahoma to have good partners in contracting, good partners in engineering that can deliver really stellar services. And this morning, we're going to recognize a couple of the outcomes of those projects in District 5 and in District 6, where we had 3 first place awards that were presented at the 50th Annual Award Ceremony Luncheon in Norman in February. Mr. Chairman, if I might, can we recognize Larry Patrick with the Oklahoma Asphalt Paving Association to come and talk a little bit about the process and then make an awards presentation. So, Larry?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, it's an honor today to be here in front of you to talk about the award program that we have with the Oklahoma Asphalt Pavement Association. This is something that was started 50 years ago by the first founding fathers of the association, trying to figure out a way to honor and recognize award-winning projects in Oklahoma, but not just on the contractor side. It was also to recognize those men and women that are also working in the contracting agencies to do the work with the contractors. So we've been successful. It was interesting when they were pulling things together that they had to come up with the categories, they had to come up with the criteria, they had to come up with the scoring mechanism, and it came out great. Then we actually had to put a team together to do the road judging. And that is Wasim Fazal with FHWA. We also have Alex Cavill with the maintenance division, and then we usually have somebody coming out of the materials division to do that with us. So, and I've always promised them, and it's a kind of an oath when we get inside the pickup truck, that whatever stays said in the pickup truck stays in the pickup truck. But I really like to honor the 3 projects that we have talked about. The first one is US 83-270 in Woodward County. This is a full depth winner that we had. Cummins Construction was the contractor. Smith Roberts Boschwater was the design. And then supervision, inspection, and quality assurance testing is District 6. Give them a hand, they did a great job. The second project was a rural overlay. It's also in Woodward County on US 412. This was designed by District 6, supervised by District 6, inspection and quality assurance by District 6. Great job for everybody up there in Buffalo. The other project that we have is in District 5. It is State Highway 3 in Watonga. It's an urban overlay. Cummins Construction, once again, it's kind of got a resounding theme that we have Cummins as part of this these 3 projects. It was designed and supervised and inspected and quality assurance testing by the Clinton Residency. Great job for Dax Sawyer and his crew. I want to say this before I get done and we start taking the pictures, but the great thing about having this going on is when you get a team effort in something like this, it's a partnership. It's where the contractor and ODOT are working together to that same goal to have a good quality project. So I want to say kudos to everybody who was part of this. It's a great, all 3 of them are great jobs. It's really getting really interesting when you go out these projects, you really see these ones that just shine. So with that, Mr. Chairman, is there any questions I could, if anybody wants to ask, I'll be glad to answer them.
All good here.
I would just like to commend everybody that worked on this project. I'm in Division 6 out there and in Division 5 a whole lot, and the work they've done out there has just been amazing on the 270, that network of roads up through there, and we've been working hard on it and appreciate everybody's help, and it's recognized by the community, the good work that everybody's done, so thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dyson and Commissioner Alexander.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, if you guys come down, we'll take a picture, and Ron and Brent, you guys come on up with your team. Picture a little bit down. There we go. You got your place. Two more and I'll be done. She wants to move herself on.
Thank you. Item 55 is approval of the minutes of the Transportation Committee meeting on April 4th, 2022. Do I have a motion for approval of item 55?
So moved, Grimsley.
Do I have a second?
Second, Coburn.
And any discussion? Sherry, please call the roll.
Mr. Coburn?
Coburn, yes.
Mr. Grimsley?
Grimsley, yes.
Mr. Frymiller?
Frymiller, yes.
Mr. Dyson?
Dyson, yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Alexander, yes.
Mr. LaForge?
LaForge, abstain.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes, and so the motion carries. Item 55 is approved. Item 56 is election of the new Transportation Commission Secretary. Ms. Penn, you are recognized to present.
Very good. Thank you, sirs. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Sarah Penn, General Counsel for ODOT. Item 56 is the election for the Secretary position due to a vacancy left by the resignation of Commissioner Shannon. Mr. Chairman, you may ask for nominations.
Open the floor for nominations for the Secretary position. I nominate Commissioner James Grimsley.
LaForge, second.
Are there any further nominations? If not, then do I have a motion to close nominations?
So moved, Dyson.
Second. Second, Alexander. Sherry, please call the roll.
Mr. Coburn?
Coburn, yes.
Mr. Grimsley?
Grimsley, abstain.
Mr. Frymiller?
Frymiller, yes.
Mr. Dyson?
Dyson, yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Alexander, yes.
Mr. LaForge?
LaForge, yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. We will now vote for the Secretary. So we'll now vote for Mr. Grimsley being appointed as Secretary of the Transportation Commission. Sherry, please call the roll.
Mr. Coburn?
Coburn, yes.
Mr. Grimsley?
Grimsley, abstain.
Mr. Frymiller?
Frymiller, yes.
Mr. Dyson?
Dyson, yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Alexander, yes.
Mr. LaForge?
LaForge, yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Congratulations, James. Thank you.
Thank you.
The consent docket contains items 57 and 58. These items were discussed in detail earlier in our subcommittee meetings. If any commissioner would like to pull an individual item out for discussion, he may do so at this time. Otherwise, I'd hear a motion for approval of the consent docket.
So moved, Grimsley.
Second, Freimiller.
Secretary will call the roll.
Mr. Coburn,
Coburn, yes.
Mr. Grimsley,
Grimsley, yes.
Mr. Freimiller,
Freimiller, yes.
Mr. Dyson,
Dyson, yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Alexander, yes.
Mr. LaForge,
LaForge, yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Peterson, yes, and the vote is unanimous. Item 59 is engineering contracts. Mr. Tiegler, you're recognized to present.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. First of all, congratulations, Commissioner Grimsley. Item 59 are my engineering contracts. I have one this month. Statewide, all districts are on-demand relocation plans. Department has selected 3 firms to provide this on-demand relocation plan service. These firms are Meshach and Associates, Pinnacle Consulting Management Group, and Universal Field Services. The aggregate not to exceed amount for these 3 contracts is $300,000. Approval is recommended, and I'll answer any questions if you have any this morning.
You've heard the presentation. Do I have a motion for approval of item 59?
Motion to approve.
And a second?
Alexander, second.
And any discussion? All right, Secretary will call the roll.
Mr. Coburn, Mr. Grimsley,
Grimsley, yes.
Mr. Freimiller,
Freimiller, yes.
Mr. Dyson,
Dyson, yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Alexander, yes.
Mr. LaForge,
LaForge, yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes. Item 60 is engineering contract supplements. Mr. Tiegler, you are recognized to continue.
Thank you. I have 3 parts this month. Part A is our statewide, all districts, on-demand bridge rehabilitation contract. The department previously selected 6 firms to provide this service. We are supplementing 5 of those firms this month. They are CEC Corporation, EST, MacArthur Associated Consultants, Neo Design, and Walter P. Moore and Associates. The total aggregate increase for these contract supplements is $1,250,000. Part B is also a statewide, all districts are on-demand engineering for ADA improvements. The department previously selected 6 firms to provide this service. These firms are Atkins North America, Cowan Group Engineering, Kimley Horn and Associates, Park Hill Smith and Cooper, R.L. Shears Company, and Smith Roberts Baldischweiler. The total aggregate increase for these contract supplements is $1,500,000. And finally, Part C, Wagner County and District 1. The department previously authorized Poe and Associates to prepare construction plans for State Highway 51. This is a connection up to the Muskogee Turnpike. The supplement not to exceed amount is $1,730,077. And the project is in the 8-year construction work plan and scheduled let date in federal fiscal year 2025. Approval is recommended. Try to answer any questions if you have any this morning.
You've heard the presentation. Do I have a motion for approval of item 60?
Coburn, so move.
Second?
Freimiller, second.
And any discussion? Secretary will call the roll, please.
Mr. Coburn,
Coburn, yes.
Mr. Grimsley,
Grimsley, yes.
Mr. Freimiller,
Freimiller, yes.
Mr. Dyson,
Dyson, yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Alexander, yes.
Mr. LaForge,
LaForge, yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 61 is change orders with a cumulative total of $75,000 or less. Mr. Leonard, you are recognized to present.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'd like to present item 61, parts A through double B. These are change orders on projects which have a cumulative total of change orders of $75,000 or less. This item is presented for information only and no action is necessary, but I'd be glad to try and answer any questions.
These change orders were discussed in detail in our subcommittee meetings. If there are no questions, Mr. Leonard, you are recognized to present item 62, change orders with a cumulative total greater than $75,000.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to present item 62, parts A through double H. These are change orders on projects which have a cumulative total of change orders greater than $75,000. Your approval is recommended, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
You've heard the presentation. Do I have a motion for approval of item 62?
LaForge, move for approval.
And do I have a second? Alexander, second. Any discussion? The secretary will call the roll, please.
Mr. Coburn?
Coburn, yes.
Mr. Grimsley?
Grimsley, yes.
Mr. Frymiller?
Frymiller, yes.
Mr. Dyson?
Dyson, yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Alexander, yes.
Mr. LaForge?
LaForge, yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Thank you.
And unanimous vote, all in favor. Item 63 is proposed bid openings. Mr. Hackney, you are recognized to present.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Item 63, proposed bid openings, consists of the final July 2022, the tentative August 2022, and the tentative September 2022 bid openings. The department recommends approval.
You've heard the presentation. Do I have a motion for approval of item 63?
So moved, Grimsley.
And a second?
Second.
Mr. Dyson? And any discussion? Secretary will call the roll, please.
Mr. Coburn?
Coburn, yes.
Mr. Grimsley?
Grimsley, yes.
Mr. Frymiller?
Frymiller, yes.
Mr. Dyson?
Dyson, yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Alexander, yes.
Mr. LaForge?
LaForge, yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Unanimous vote, all approving. Item 64 is additions to the Industrial Access Road Program. Mr. Surratt, you are recognized to present.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Item 64 is 3 additions to the Industrial Access Road Program. First one's in Creek County, District 8. The commissioners there have requested an industrial project for Jones Memorial Airport. Airport's investing more than $1.4 million in a new hangar and fueling station there, and will create up to 10 new full-time jobs. The project begins at the intersection of State Highway 48 and West 241st Street South, and extends west approximately 2 miles. Then it turns back to the south for approximately 1 mile, and then back east on West 251st Street South for approximately 2 miles back to State Highway 48. The county will be responsible for the initiation and construction of all work associated with the project. Total cost is approximately $1.4 million, with the department providing $650,000, Creek Nation $650,000, and the county provide $100,000. Any questions? The second warrant is Part B in Muskogee County. The Muskogee City County Port Authority has requested this project for Griffin Industrial Park. Core Sciences Industries and YZY Capital are investing $1.2 billion in 2 facilities there in the park. This is the largest business investment in Muskogee County history, and it'll create approximately 60 new full-time jobs. The project begins at Dow Tile Road and Smith Ferry and extends west on Smith Ferry for about a half a mile to South 24th Street, then south on South 24th Street for another half of a mile. The Port Authority will be responsible for all the work on the project. Estimated cost is $2.7 million, with the department's participation not to exceed $1.6 million. And finally, Part C is also in Muskogee County. The same company that's participating in the second project is also building an additional project, spending another $80 million in Oaktaha, just south of Muskogee. This project begins on West 133rd Street South at Oaktaha Road and extends west for approximately 0.8 miles to South 104th Street South, then back north to on South 104th for about a half a mile. The county was responsible for the initiation, construction, completion, all work on the project, with the department's participation not to exceed $280,000. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Move for approval. Coburn.
Yep, thank you. You've heard the presentation. Mr. Coburn makes the first motion. Do I have a second?
LaForge, second.
And any discussion?
Not so much a discussion, but a kudos to Muskogee County. I did a double take on that 1.2 billion.
I did too. My goodness.
Pretty good.
And not many jobs, but a ton of investment. My goodness. All right, Secretary, will please call the roll.
Mr. Coburn?
Coburn, yes.
Mr. Grimsley?
Grimsley, yes.
Mr. Frymiller?
Frymiller, yes.
Mr. Dyson?
Dyson, yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Alexander, yes.
Mr. LaForge?
LaForge, yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes, unanimous, clears by unanimous vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 65 is declaration of emergency bridge repair project. Mr. Davis, you are recognized to present.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. This will be an information-only item. This is an emergency declaration for a bridge on US 281, which is also an original piece of Route 66, over an unnamed creek in Caddo County. On March 28th, ODOT Bridge Division was notified of a critical change in condition to the substructure, possibly due to a heavy load, which had led to settlement in the superstructure. Temporary shim plates were installed to prevent further settlement, and traffic was restricted to one lane. On March 29th, in accordance with state statutes and administrative code, Secretary Gatz declared that an emergency existed and efforts were undertaken to execute a contract to perform the needed repairs. On April 14th, bids were received and a contract was awarded to the low bidder, Central Bridge Company out of Jones, Oklahoma, for a little over $192,000. The roadway was closed and work began on April 20th. And I'm happy to report that the last concrete pour was made last Wednesday on April 27th, and the bridge is expected to be fully open to traffic by the end of this week. I'd like to recognize and thank the crews out in District 7 that recognized this problem and jumped on it, the ODOT Bridge Division for their quick turnaround on the repair plans, and our Office Engineer Division for getting the contract underway so quickly to get this thing reopened. So I'd like to answer any questions if you guys have any about this.
You've heard the presentation. Are there any questions from commissioners? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 66 is awards. Mr. Dels, you are recognized to present.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning. Item 66 are recommendations for awards. My presentation will be in 3 parts this morning. Part A is the decision regarding the deferral from the March 17th bid opening. The following item referred to by call order was deferred from the March 17th bid opening. It is now recommended that that item be awarded. And that's call order 815. That should be the first page on your packet. Part B is an informational only item. April 14th emergency bid opening, which Sean just read to you guys. On March 29th, the ODOT director declared an emergency on US 281 in Caddo County. An emergency bid opening was held on April 14th with the intent of entering into a contract with a local contractor to repair the roadway. A contract was awarded at that time to Central Bridge Company for $192,590.80. Work began on April 20th and was estimated to last 21 days. And Sean reported the last pour was last week, and they're expected to open the road soon. Part C is our recommendations from the April 14th bid opening. It is recommended that the following item from the April 14th bid opening referred to by call order be awarded. As call orders 100, 105, 107, 109, 110, 120, 122, 127, 135, 140, 145, 150, 155, 160, 165, 170, 180, 185, 195, 210, 215, 220, 225, 235, 245, 250, 272, 275, 280, 285, 290, 295, 300, and 305. This includes the recommendations for awards, and your approval is requested.
Anthony, any remarks about the 4 Pushmataha projects that weren't bid on?
Yes, sir. That project is a hot-in-place recycle project, which is a pretty complicated piece of work.
Say that again.
Hot-in-place recycle, which is a pretty long paving train. You have a piece of equipment that leads and mills up the road, and there's some equipment behind it that adds material to it and places it back down on the asphalt. There's very few contractors in the state that do that work. We did receive word right before the bid opening that there was a contractor interested in it, but he missed the deadline to pull those bidding documents. But we have been in touch with that contractor. We do expect bids next month.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. You've heard the presentation. Do I have a motion for approval of item 66?
Motion to approve. Move for approval.
And a second.
Second.
Second, Mr. Alexander. Any discussion? All right, Secretary will call the roll.
Mr. Coburn?
Coburn, yes.
Mr. Grimsley?
Grimsley, yes.
Mr. Frymiller?
Frymiller, yes.
Mr. Dyson?
Dyson, yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Alexander, yes.
Mr. LaForge?
LaForge, yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes, the vote was unanimous.
Thank you, sirs.
Thank you. Item 67 is the Director's Report. Secretary Gatz, you are recognized to present.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'll maybe apologize in advance for what will be an uncharacteristically lengthy director's report today, but we've got quite a bit to talk about. I would start by thanking the commission for your consideration and award of the contract in Love County, Thackerville on Interstate 35. And I think it's very important for us to take the time to really talk about what's happening in the Interstate 35 corridor right now. This contract is widening Interstate 35 from 4 to 6 lanes from mile marker 1 to mile marker 3. So small scale improvement, but desperately needed. And that puts us out just a little bit ahead of a larger project that is a partnership with TxDOT and with participation of the Chickasaw Nation that will seek to land the 8 lanes of Interstate 35 that TxDOT is bringing towards the Oklahoma line. This $11 million award will help us manage that construction traffic in the future. It's just the beginning of what we're going to have to accomplish on the Oklahoma side, coming from the south to the north. And if you don't really understand what Texas is going to think, what Texas believes is going to happen in the Interstate 35 corridor, they're widening it to 8 lanes. So we've got to manage that for the future in Oklahoma. We really need to get 6 lanes at least north of Ardmore for the future. That's a long-term concept and a long-term strategy, and it's going to take a lot of resources to get there. We don't have a solution for that right now, but it's time that we get after really trying to figure out how we're going to make that happen, because it's going to be needed. Likewise, if you come to the Oklahoma City metropolitan area and you go south from the Oklahoma River right out here, we're carrying about 150,000 cars a day at the Oklahoma River. We have a major project that needs to be done there that we're in conversations with the city of Oklahoma City right now to make that system, Interstate 235 connecting to 35, Interstate 40 at the Dallas Junction, work better from an operational perspective. And then how do we get that into the 6 lanes of flow in the 35 corridor? Going south from there, we've got some pavement that's at the end of its life cycle. We're going to have a major rehabilitation project in the 35 corridor just south of the Oklahoma River, going south. Get a little bit further south of there, we've got a major interchange project, interstate to interstate interchange at Interstate 35 and I-240, that by the time we will complete it, it will rival the work that we've just completed out here at Interstate 235 and Interstate 44. That type of an interchange improvement project. We're about 2 phases into it and got several phases to go. When you go south of 240, then you begin to encounter some of the explosive demographic growth that we're beginning to see in South Oklahoma County, Cleveland County, McLean County, Grady County, all of that area to the south, all the way to Purcell and beyond is beginning to grow as part of the Oklahoma City metropolitan area, continuing to grow, not beginning to grow, but continuing to grow. Look at 19th Street in the city of Moore and the interchange there with Interstate 35. And what happens is that interstate breaks down under high traffic flows and begins to back traffic up into the community and cause other problems on the surface street system. And it puts additional pressure in the Interstate 35 corridor. You go south of 19th just a little bit, we've just built a new bridge over at 34th Street. The first thing that Moore started to talk to us about when we completed that 34th Street bridge over is it really needs to be an interchange, because it really does. But we can't make it an interchange in the context of the conditions that we have in the 35 corridor right now, because it will not work. It's not feasible. South of there, ODOT had a bridge replacement planned at Indian Hills. A bridge replacement at that location with the volumes that we're seeing and the traffic patterns we're seeing develop down there is not good enough. We had to look larger first at a bigger interchange improvement at Indian Hills and I-35, and the department has been working on that work diligently. So the whole I-35 corridor. And by the way, we started widening the 35 corridor to 6 lanes out here at the Oklahoma River in 1979. When we cut the ribbon on Highway 9 East down at Norman about 4 years ago now, we completed it. So that was 40 years worth of work to get that 1 lane of capacity added to the Interstate 35 corridor. The problem that we are going to have with the traffic volumes when you project 30 years into the future and start to think about what that's going to look like, and you understand that the Interstate 35 corridor on the north end at the metropolitan area of Oklahoma City is capacity constrained. We can't widen it very effectively. We can optimize the traffic flows, which the department is working hard on a study to accomplish some optimization, but we can't manage it for the future. It will eventually turn to gridlock as more and more traffic adds. We see it in peak periods now, where we go to gridlock, and there's 5 accidents a day in the corridor between Purcell and I-40. So this is a major long-term transportation problem that we are going to have to solve. The discussion between the Department of Transportation and the Turnpike Authority about what tools we might have in the toolbox to help manage the condition that we know is coming. Texas is bringing 8 lanes of Interstate 35 to the border. So the traffic volumes that we are experiencing are not going to decrease. What are we going to do for the future? And part of that is what the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority is doing in response to the department's concerns and those conversations with some of the new loop system that's in Access Oklahoma, whether that's at Indian Hills, where we need, if you go south of I-40, you hit 240, and that moves traffic pretty effectively in a loop configuration. But you go south of 240, and there's really no good loop system, no good east-west traffic mover, especially in that connection between I-44 and I-35. So we've got to start to think about how we're going to manage that traffic for the future. And these types of reliever routes that can help with that corridor issue we're seeing develop are critical to our future. And again, that's a partnership between the Department of Transportation and the Turnpike Authority that we're working on, and we're taking what's happening in the 35 corridor very serious. And it's going to continue to present a problem for the future. So again, I thought it was important to take the opportunity not just to thank you for the award and the consideration of the project at the state line, but to really talk a little bit about what we're seeing develop in the 35 corridor on both ends. We need to get 6 lanes south of Purcell right now. The department's going to work diligently on that. The 9 West interchange that we've talked a lot about is part of that. We're about to rebuild that 9 West interchange, but that's not enough. We've got to get that capacity add south of the 9 West interchange and try to get it south of Purcell. This all factors into how we're going to manage traffic in a primary interstate corridor in the state of Oklahoma, and what we're going to have to do to try to accomplish that. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to visit a little bit about that this morning, but I thought it was important to bring an understanding of all of the moving parts that go in to the discussion around not just Access Oklahoma with OTA, but the work that the Department of Transportation has got ahead of us to try to manage the traffic in that corridor. So happy to pause for questions, Mr. Chairman, if there are any.
Is the federal government of any assistance with this, or are they an impediment to our doing what needs to be done?
That's a loaded question.
Sorry.
But
I'll whisper it in your ear.
Yeah. I think if you look at the increased investment opportunities from the interstate or from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the EJA bill, there's some additional assistance there. Now, there's certainly a debate going on right now as how much of that will actually, number one, find its way to the highways, and number two, how much of it will be eroded in inflationary buying power loss. So there's 5 years from now, we'll know how big a deal that was. But I think the recognition is with consideration of all the resources the Department of Transportation has available to us, it's not enough. We're going to talk a little bit more about that this morning in a presentation, but we can't get our arms around by ourselves the types of improvements that are going to need to be made to support specifically that I-35 corridor, but we've got those needs across the state, and those needs are only growing in every, whether it's safety, whether it's capacity, whether it's the ability to support development that's happening. Those needs are across the entire state. But I wanted to focus this morning particularly on the 35 corridor because it's an area that I am deeply concerned about when you look into the future about what's going to happen there.
I guess what I'd just elaborate a little bit is the federal government has an interest in seeing that all the interstates move smoothly. And obviously they don't in some areas. So I didn't know if they interjected themselves at the state level and say, look, you guys really need to focus on this.
They absolutely do.
They do, okay.
And we interact with Federal Highway Administration from especially on the interstate system, from an operational perspective. So whatever we do in the corridor, they're a partner and they've got a seat at the table with us in the decision making. Certainly we welcome their recommendations on different types of treatments that we can do. And those will be considered in the context of optimization in the 35 corridor. But again, the thing I think that's important to recognize is it took us 40 years to add that capacity.
Yeah.
And we can't widen it very effectively any further. So that's our challenge. And we're starting to talk about what we might do to address the issue. But again, I wanted to give the commission that little bit of perspective this morning.
Thank you.
The Oklahoma Capital Improvement Authority, OCIA, meets on Wednesday, and one of the agenda items is a rural Tiffy loan that the Department of Transportation is pursuing. You'll recall that's for our ramp project, and that ramp is focused on putting shoulders on rural two-lane highways, which is really, really important for safety improvement in the rural areas. And what that Tiffy loan does is it provides the department with access to some financing that the ultimate rate when we get to closure on that loan will be 1/2 of treasuries. So right now that's slightly over 1% interest. So it's a good long-term investment to help us accelerate the work on the rural twos. We will have a second Tiffy loan, very much like this one, that will follow on the heels of this closing of the current loan. And again, we'll make that investment back into some additional rural two-lane projects because that's a big focus area for us, especially when you start to talk about where a large percentage of our fatalities happen. So again, want to make you aware of that. And by having that loan and those additional resources interjected earlier in the process, earlier in the program, it helps us lift the entirety of our rural two-lane strategy across all 8 districts. So again, that's very, very important to us, and we're excited and appreciate the Commission's support for us moving forward with some of those different types of alternative financing opportunities.
Is that 200 million, is that the statutory cap on borrowing?
Yes, sir, Commissioner. We've got an authorization to do up to 200 million right now in statutory for federal loans or bonding. And again, this is part of that 200 million, so we'll seek another additional loan in the future. At this time, I've got a little bit of a presentation queued up, I think, that's going to come up on the monitors. And you will remember Commissioner Grimsley asked us at the last Transportation Commission meeting to talk a little bit with a focus in particular on rural safety, because that's something that is very important to us. Obviously, it's a performance metric for us, and I'll call your attention to the fact that Oklahoma ranks about 45th in the country in fatalities per 100,000 in capita. So we want to be better than 45th, but we've got to make the right investments to do so. But the question Commissioner Grimsley asked is, how does the department factor those types of metrics into our funding formula? And what type of consideration goes into it? So I thought I would walk you through a presentation here that'll start to talk a little bit about how we try to get our arms around that. And my expectation is commissioners, this turns into more of a dialogue. You know, As soon as we get our budget numbers through the legislative session, we will begin to talk about rebalancing our 8-year work plan. So I want this to be an ongoing conversation, but this is a good opportunity, and I'll walk through this as fast as I can, and then we'll talk, see if you've got any questions. And please stop me if I get to a point where you want to visit a little bit. The Department of Transportation, we've got a 3-prong approach to managing our infrastructure. It starts with routine and special maintenance, and that's the work that we get done sometimes via contract, but usually with our own forces. And that's patching the potholes, taking care of some surface maintenance activities that might be a little more extensive, taking care of mowing the rights of way and keeping the signage refreshed and doing some things like that. So that's our routine and special maintenance focus. So that's the beginning of our investment strategy. Then we've got the asset preservation program, which is that 4-year plan that has got some flexibility to it, but what it's really focused on is doing life cycle extending improvements. And what that means is making investments before a pavement surface or bridge gets so bad that we've just got to replace it. So that's kind of the second prong of our approach, those life cycle extenders. And then the third part of that is the 8-year construction work plan. And the 8-year work plan addresses those projects that go beyond just life cycle extending. Sometimes they're operational improvements in urban interchanges. Many times that's putting shoulders on Rural 2s and doing some things like that. So again, but that's the heavier type of work that's part of our 8-year work plan, long-standing investment strategy. So 3 things that we do and tools that we've got in our resource toolbox to help manage the highway infrastructure. And again, we're talking about highways. No city streets unless Main Street is the highway. No county roads. This is focused on the numbered routes on our state highway system, the U.S. routes, and the interstate system. So next slide, please. Our rebalancing process, and again, we'll kind of work our way through this. The first thing that we've got to do is get our budget numbers, receive the district budgets, rebalance the existing work plan with the available funds, look at the funding formulas, and that's a data-driven process that factors back into our project selection, and we look at surface condition, deficient shoulders, bridge condition, geometrics, which is steep hills and sharp curves, horizontal and vertical alignments. That's looking at traffic considerations and traffic volumes, how much truck traffic is out there on the highways, the accident histories, and then capacity, and what are the capacities of the routes across the state. The second part of that is if we have the budgetary capacity, and again, that's heavily predicated on the budget year that the state's having. We've been through some tough years where we've had to actually cut budgets, which is not a good thing. We don't anticipate that we will have that issue this year, but we've got to have those budget numbers to make those projections to give the field district engineers an idea what they've got to work with. And then they get about the business of proposing some new projects that are based on the inventory of those needs, stakeholder input. That certainly includes the perspectives that you gentlemen bring to the each field division engineer, district engineer, and what are our performance targets? What are our focus areas? What are we trying to accomplish? And then we verify those projects using that, what I'll call a multi-objective decision analysis tool. That's a mouthful, but we're going to show you a little bit of a perspective about what that looks like. So again, we've got our priorities, we've got an understanding of what we're after, and I want to tell you safety. Safety runs through everything that we do, and it's a primary factor. And I call your attention to that because in this decision analysis tool, you know, we look at the inventories, we look at the characteristics that each of the districts is dealing with, and then we get our senior leadership and the district engineers together, and we start talking about how do you value and how do you weight these different categories. You see enhanced safety by improving crash hotspots as number 3 down in the list there. Well, that doesn't mean safety is number 3, because invest in key economic corridors has got a safety component to it, because those economic corridors, a lot of times, is where we see accident hotspots develop. That's where we see needs and traffic volumes developing. Same thing with geometric deficiencies. So, safety is intertwined into all of these, but you can kind of see how those things rank. So we sit down and talk about these different aspects and say, what's important to you? I don't think that, you can bend and twist this just a little bit, but that's pretty consistent across all 8 districts on where we come down with when we work our way through this analysis tool. Next slide. We take that analysis tool then and apply it to projects. How well, and each one of these numbers on the side of the slide there, the 3, 5, 7, 0, 5, 0, 4 represent projects, right? So each one of these is a different project. And if you look at that, you can see how the weighted characteristics apply based on the legend there that's on the right-hand side. And that helps us understand how each one of these projects is a priority in the context of our 8-year plan. What piece of our priorities that resulted from our decision analysis tool are represented in each one of these projects, right? So again, it's a very narrowly defined process, and then we apply those to each one of our projects that we're talking about bringing forward. And then we bring that process in, put as best numbers to it as we can, and then that helps us finalize recommendations for adding projects to the work plan and our asset preservation plan that materializes in our presentation for your approval. So that gets at the kind of the rebalancing side and how we use some of the technologies to come into play to help us make good decisions and what factors in there. And that gets us through the rebalancing process. But it's bigger than just rebalancing. So when we go to the next slide, here's where we talk about our formula that we use. And this is really focused on the 8-year construction work plan and how the resources are divided in the work plan. It is reduced in administrative code, so it's part of the commission rule. I'm not going to certainly read that whole section to you, but in generality, the percentage formula that we use to divide the 8-year construction work plan dollars, state and federal, is percent of population, percent of mainline highway system miles, and that translates to not just centerline miles, but that's all approximately 33,000 lane miles that we've got to manage. And then percentage of the 15-year construction program, which is kind of an equalizing factor that keeps us sort of balanced and on track. And that formula has been the same in that format since we started the 8-year construction work plan.
Question, what's the difference between a center line mile and a main line mile?
So a center line mile, if you went out on the yellow line and you stretched a tape measure,
right,
that's a center line mile, so 1 mile equals 1 mile. A lane mile is in that same mile. If that's a 4-lane highway, there are 4 lane miles to that 1 mile.
Thank you.
So again, that is a heavy influence and a factor, because if you're taking care of a 4-lane highway or a 6-lane highway, that's not necessarily the same as managing a 2-lane facility. So again, been pretty effective, and this has been a pretty good representation of how to divide our resources. And we're going to drill into the detail just a little bit about why we believe that formula has been pretty effective. So let's go to the next slide. So this gives you an idea of what we've been working with since 2012. And again, we update the population numbers, keep an eye on the lane miles, but we do that every 10 years with the census. So we're in process of updating those numbers right now. So you can see the funding splits there, and that's percentage population, percentage of lane miles, and the 15-year average. And the district percentages across the whole state are reflected in the blue column. And then you can look at what we're looking at for the 22 through 31 funding splits, and those are adjusted for the current census. And there's been a little bit of a difference made based on some population changes that we've seen out there, and to a lesser extent based on some changes in the percent of lane miles. But again, you can see that when you look at population, you look at lane miles and things like that, there is a correlation there that you can make that makes sense. And again, that is mainline lane miles only. That's what we're considering when we talk about that percent of lane miles, Commissioner Peterson in particular. Okay, next slide. So when you look at our asset preservation plan and how we allocate those funds, you know, again, and we've got multiple components there. We have a state resurfacing program that's called SSR that's designed to get at some of that life cycle extending improvement on our surfaces. We've got a federal resurfacing program that's same thing, but it's a little bit of a more intense treatment usually because it is funded with federal funding and the requirements are a little higher than what we would experience for state surface funding. State bridge rehabilitation, that's been an area where we've been able to really help our structurally deficient bridge problem because we can go in and do an SBR project and make sure a bridge doesn't go structurally deficient, sometimes bring one back from structural deficiency. But it's investing in extending the life cycle of that bridge, usually another 20 years. So getting the maximum utilization out of it with that SBR program. And then finally, we've got a ADA improvements that goes into that preservation, which really is usually focused in downtown sidewalk areas, where we're working with some of the smaller communities to bring their sidewalk system up to ADA standard. Because it can present some challenges for us to go in and make improvements on the highway if it's Main Street, if those adjacent facilities are not brought up to standard. So that's a reflection of our asset preservation plan. Next slide. So when you consider all of that and you look at our current investment, and there's some overlap between these different pieces of pie on this pie chart, but I think this is a pretty good illustrative example. 32% of our investment goes into rural two-lane highways because it's a priority for us. That 38% that's operation and condition is spread out across the state. There's going to be a little bit of urban interchange work in there. There's going to be some urban interstate. There's going to be lots of other operational issues that we're addressing, whether that's on I-40 or whether that's on US 69. Lots of different things factor into it. That interstate paving, that 6% that's in that orange slice, is primarily rural interstate, and that's conditional enhancement. And then you got 8% there that's urban congestion mitigation, and typically those are narrowly focused dollars that are doing some type of an improvement to try to make traffic flow better in an urban area and optimize that traffic flow. And then 16% of our investment goes back into bridges. So that gives you just a quick snapshot of where our investment is. Focusing specifically on rural two-lane highways, this is part of our data analysis that we're working really hard on right now to make sure that our investment strategy aligns with our priorities. And we're going to be able to turn over time more and more information like this public facing so folks can understand what we're doing. But if you look at this map in particular, the red lines, every red line on there is a rural two-lane highway that doesn't have shoulders on it. We've got more than 5,000 miles of those types of highways across the state. And Commissioner Grimsley, I'm going to tell you that a large percentage of those 65% fatalities that happen in the rural areas happen on highways with those characteristics. So it's an obvious priority for us across the state. All districts have these, and it's a pretty equally balanced problem. So we're seeking to make sure that we're following through and investing in those priorities. And I think this map is an illustrative example that we're accomplishing that, you know, with a certain level. So we've got 785 miles that are programmed. 230 miles were added in this last rebalancing. So that's in the green. The blue is the 785 that's out there. And then the orange are projects that are under construction right now. So we're covering a reasonable percentage of the map, but it's not enough. we've got to really stay focused on this issue because, again, a lot of times we're not only getting at just adding shoulders to a rural two, there's a conditional issue, there's a geometric issue, there's something that we're making improvements on in addition to just putting safety shoulders in. So again, and this type of data that we're looking to turn more public facing is not going to be limited just to rural two-lane highways. It's to all of our decision making. And the guys are doing a good job advancing some of these new technologies. And I'm really looking forward to a time where we can turn this public facing and everybody can kind of see what we're thinking and why. But these are some of the things that your district engineer is drilling into to try to make good decisions, and some of the things that he's looking at as he starts to make decisions about what his investment strategy is going to look like and what he's going to recommend to you. Next slide. Two-lane highways on the state highway system. This gives you a little bit that starts to drill into where are all the miles traveled at in the state. So the two-lane highway daily vehicle miles traveled, that's what DVMT is. On the state highway system is about 20,000 daily vehicle miles, 20 million, I'm sorry, 20 million daily vehicle miles traveled out there on the two-lane state highway system. And it's about 29% of the total traffic that's traveled in the state of Oklahoma, which is almost 70 million daily vehicle miles traveled. That's just a quick snapshot just to give you a little bit of a comparison. So, 29% of the traffic, but that 29% of the traffic, we see 65% of the fatalities. So keep that in perspective. But the two lanes carry 29% of the total. Some of the things that are additional that we talked about this morning. The Tiffy loans are a good tool in our toolbox. We've got one of those going right now. We've received some congressionally directed spending that'll help us also with our rural two-lane project. We're very, very appreciative of, and that'll help us accelerate more of that work. And those congressional dollars are federal dollars that, again, we're going to put to work immediately. Upcoming, we've got another Tiffy loan opportunity that we're going to pursue, and then we will, and you gentlemen have heard me talk about the discretionary dollars that are available in the EJA bill, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. We will pursue every opportunity to bring those discretionary dollars back to Oklahoma, and one of those is a rural grant opportunity that's specifically focused on rural highway safety. So we're going to put together about a $100 million application. That's in process right now that we're going to be ready to deliver. And again, looking for every opportunity to get back and try to address that rural fatality issue that we all know exists. So when you look at the state highway system, and this gets back to the 8-year construction work plan formula, and I asked the guys to really take a hard look at this. So we've got our highway vehicle miles traveled in each district, and that's a percentage of the total. Then you've got the two-lane highways with deficient shoulders, and that's mileage of those that are represented in each one of the different districts. Highway mainline lane miles, so that is how many lane miles you've got in your district and what percentage that constitutes. Your population based on the current census, the crashes that we've recorded, and these are, and I'm going to look at Brian just a second to make sure I'm not telling you wrong, but these are 2020 crashes. In 2020, I put a little bit of a qualifier on it. The data is still reflective, but, a lot of different things influenced traffic in 2020, COVID being one of them. So patterns were a little bit different. We've got to recognize that, but that's the numbers. And then the percentage of fatality crashes that we've had out there on that system. So when you look across those metrics, those factors, and you work your way over to the current funding formula, there's a pattern there that I think is pretty consistent. And what that sort of tells you is that our formula has been somewhat effective in balancing the needs that we have in each district with the demands that are out there on our system and with the dollars and resources that we've got available. And I'm not going to dwell on these, but I'll use this as an example. Rural and urban, and where your traffic happens, and the defining aspect of separating rural from urban is everything that has a population of less than 5,000. Urban is over 5,000. So that's just a little bit of a characteristic. But this is another good snapshot of each district, and we've done this for each district, so it's in your presentation. And again, you'll see, this stuff tracks pretty close with the formula that we've got put together. It will always be an imperfect system, but it's pretty darn good, and we validate it regularly. So let's go through the 8 districts and get to the next slide after that. These are all the same, but it gives you as commissioners just another opportunity to kind of look at your district a little bit differently. This gets at that number. And Commissioner Grimsley, this is the question you ask us. 19% national is rural. 45% of the fatality crashes that happen are on those rural systems. In Oklahoma, it's 34% rural population. We're still a very rural state here. 65% of our fatalities happen out on that 34%. One of the important aspects that we talked about, and the guys trend lined the comparative, but they took all of the states, looked at the U.S. average, and then trend lined that, and you can see where Oklahoma falls just off the trend line. I had a little bit of an adverse reaction to the 34% and 65%, but once you get a little bit deeper into it, we're not far off the trend line, so we're having an effect. Not enough of an effect, but that shows that we're doing our best to balance our investment strategy and the resources we've got available still to try to get some of the issues like this that we see out on our rural system. Next slide. I thought this was important, and again, this is not related to the 8-year construction work plan or the asset preservation program directly, but this is another example of how we're using some tools that we've got available to us and are developing something here that will help us focus our maintenance activities. So we're standing up a maintenance quality assurance program. Credit to Brian Taylor and Sean Davis and Taylor Henderson and the district engineers for the work that they're doing on this. But that's going to help us make better decisions all the way down to our maintenance resources. And that's about how do you prioritize, how do you communicate, and how do you do things differently. And that's a data-driven system. We've always done this, but we've never been very good at telling the story. And we're going to have to get better at it, because maintenance, it gets back to that whole thing. Are you investing in the right treatments at the right locations at the right time to make sure we're realizing the full life cycle of our infrastructure? So let's go to the next slide. Here's an example, and this one's from Nevada. These systems are being developed and used across the country, and this just gives you an idea. And this is focused on traffic stripe. And, when we talk about things like autonomous vehicles, traffic stripe becomes infinitely more important. Not just that it's in good shape, but how do you stripe a construction work zone? To make sure that you're not just thinking about moving drivered traffic, but if you've got a vehicle that's driverless and it's using edge stripe as some way to make a decision, how are you going to make sure that you've got that accounted for in a construction work zone? And we're seeing problems like that materialize across the country. So again, it's something we're going to have to pay more attention to, but that gives you a little bit of an idea of just a very narrowly focused look at what condition do we have and what are we going to do with it. The next slide is about trade-off analysis. And this is an extremely powerful tool. And it shows you where your maintenance dollars are being spent, what results they're yielding, and then it begins to give you some ideas about if you did something different, what effect would that have on the other activities that you're considered to be priorities in your maintenance. So again, never had a tool where we could do this on the fly to kind of help us make decisions and think things through and validate our decision-making, which is equally important. And again, this is a Nevada example, but we're on the verge of having this that we can introduce and use right here in Oklahoma. The next slide is another one that I think is very telling. And this says, this is where we spend our maintenance dollars. And if you look at that, I don't think anybody would be surprised that we spend a lot of our dollars on pavement surfaces to try to make sure we're getting that full life cycle out of our pavement. Mowing, roadside maintenance is extremely important, whether you're talking about keeping the sight triangles and the roadsides looking good, but also, you know, something like wildfire. Western Oklahoma, we've had a really bad wildfire problem, and it's important that we go in and keep the vegetation within the rights-of-way managed. And again, so that mowing is a really important part. And then snow and ice removal, which is, there is no more safety-centric maintenance function than snow and ice management. So you can see 66% of all the maintenance dollars that we spend, that 162 plus million a year, go into those three activities. And you expand that to trash cleanup, sign maintenance, and erosion control, and you now put a rope around 80% of all our maintenance dollars. And then you don't have to get much further down the list, and where you can cover almost 100%, looking at bridge, pavement markings, drainage, cable barrier, and guardrail. That gets us to, what, 95%? And I don't think that, I certainly wasn't surprised when I saw this list, but I think it does validate the things that we ought to be focused on and the things that we're trying to make progress on all the time. Next slide. This tool is in development right now, and we're going to have more and more capability with it. Again, I can't talk enough about the guys and the effort that they've put into making this possible, but we hope to have this thing pretty well fully operational by 2023, and that we can use it in our budgeting process in 2024 to really start to pay attention, and then we'll monitor, control, making those adjustments whenever you're doing trade-off analysis. So do we need to do more of this or more of that? And if we do that, what effect did it have on everything else? Because again, it's always a careful balance between what we're doing out there on the highways. But this is a big-time tool, and the guys are doing a good job of bringing it along. And that gets me to the end. And again, the thing I want to emphasize, Commissioners, and Commissioner Grimsley, thank you so much for the question, because it gave us an opportunity to really, you know, kind of think this through ourselves and revisit it. We were going to have to anyway with the update of the census, so the timing was really good. I think we've got a pretty good level of comfort that our formulas are pretty well aligned, but I would ask you to, and I've thrown a lot of information at you, so but think about this, and if you've got questions that come out of it, ask those. We can address them in the context of future commission meetings, certainly in the context of rebalancing the 8-year work plan and talking about what priorities we have. And so I think we want to do a little bit deeper dive with you. So,
well, thank you, Mr. Secretary. That was extremely thorough and helpful, certainly to me. And again, thank you, Commissioner Grimsley, for coming up with that question and inspiring that work. So, Commissioners have any other questions?
More of a comment. You know, the statute that empowers us says that we are to make decisions that work to the advantage and benefit of the citizens of the state. And so it's a pretty heavy obligation, duty, and expectation, really, we have. And the reality is we don't have the resources to meet the need. That's a reality we start with. But you know, I've said it many times. I come from a field of aviation where I spent 30-something years in that field. The public does not tolerate safety problems. We're in the safest area we've ever been, and yet we have 47,000 deaths a year. If we had 47,000 deaths a year in aviation would be shut down. And that means that over 100 people a day, and if you think about the individual consequences, over 100 families or more a day get that devastating call. hospital or law enforcement. And looking out on the future, it's how are we going to sustain this? That's what drives me in my day job, because I'm working on alternatives to all of this. But at this, how do we sustain this in a way that benefits society? And this is a heavy responsibility. I do want to commend you. This is excellent. And I want to also commend you on the improved data we've been getting. I think ODOT is doing a lot in terms of reforming how reporting internally. It's starting to help us, but it also helps us understand how difficult this is, and it's going to continue to be. So,
Well, you're right, but I believe that and you'll know the exact numbers, but I think for 20 years or longer, fatalities have been coming down.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just recently, within the last several years, that they stopped and then continue to get worse.
Yeah.
We saw that begin to trend up just in advance of COVID.
Yeah.
And of all things, when we dealt with COVID, we saw traffic volumes come down and fatalities go up. Yeah. And, that seems counterintuitive. There's a lot of things that factor into that. And Commissioner Grimsley, to put an exclamation point on what you just said, we are not resourced at a level to address every problem that we have out there on the transportation system. Prioritization becomes hugely important because what can we do to move the needle? And I think that's reflected in adding shoulders on real two-lane highways. That should be a priority in the state of Oklahoma, because we know that we have a lot of accidents on those, not just rural two lanes, but the ones that don't have safety shoulders. So we're making those investments. We've made that a priority. But at the same time, we've got more than 5,000 miles of it, and only about 1,000 of it's covered. So we've got lots of work ahead of us. It's going to take a long-term commitment, and we're not resourced at the level we would like to be to really make a difference. But I think it's our decision-making process that we're trying to really make sure that you gentlemen are comfortable with. And again, appreciate the opportunity to go through that, and I appreciate your patience, because that was a 30-plus slide presentation, and it took me a minute to get through it, but it was really important. And again, I expect this dialogue to continue as we go through rebalance. So,
Well, for another loaded question, do you get legislative support on how the money is allocated, or I should say legislative influence?
So I think I would never tell you that a legislator and their perspective and their representation of their constituency is not unimportant in our world.
Of course.
So my expectation of our legislature is that they bring problems forward, and let me tell you, they bring problems forward a lot of times that we are not aware of, because they've heard something from one of their constituents that's out there traveling. The value of having that input is critical. So I can't separate the legislature from our prioritization and our decision-making process, because they're a big factor of it.
Yeah.
Now, do they try to influence project decision-making and things like that? That's very limited. And again, they are entrusting the Transportation Commission to hold us accountable for that prioritization and decision-making. They're trusting the professionals in our engineering environment and the work that those professionals do to help us make sure our priorities are right. What we have to get better at is illustrating the needs that we have out there on the system and showing in a better way how we're addressing those needs.
Yeah, I'm not sure enough noise has been made about the adding the safety shoulders. That was new to me here when it ever first came up. Sure. And so a lot of people in downtown Tulsa may not, I don't want to say don't care, but they don't understand the importance of that.
Yeah, we're going to continue to bring that message forward and talk about it, because it's got to be a priority for us. The other thing, and Commissioner Grimsley, even though we're not resourced at the level we'd like to be, the one thing I want to give the legislature credit for, certainly the governor's credit for, is we're not nearly as bad off as we would have been had they not begun to invest in transportation in Oklahoma with tools like the Roads Fund. And that has been absolutely a savior for our transportation infrastructure. And having those additional resources available has been a big deal for us. And that's why we have been able to save a lot more lives out there than we would have otherwise. That's why we've been able to make progress on structurally deficient bridges. So the legislative engagement has been to try to help support us with the resources to try to get at these problems as best we could. Great. And I certainly would be remiss if I didn't recognize that fact. So,
all right.
And to close, Mr. Chairman, if I might, and I'll make this a little bit short, but, and it's going to put another exclamation point on the safety side of this, but, you know, we're closing out April, which we characterize as Work Zone Safety Month, and that's focused particularly on construction work zones, and that's important because we have those are the most dangerous areas of travel out on the state highway system, and we've got a lot of active construction projects out there right now. We're going to have more. So as we ramp up our travel, I'd once again ask the traveling public to be our partner in those construction work zones and pay attention and do what they can to be able to help keep themselves safe and keep our workers safe. So I want to put an exclamation point on that, but I'd also acknowledge that we had a rough weekend out on the highway system. And when I say a rough weekend, we had 9 fatality crashes out on the highway system over the weekend in the turnpike system. And that's a trend that we want to reverse that, take it the other way. And again, the public and the partnership that they've got to have with us, we're doing our best with the resources we've got to give them a safe highway system. They've got to help us. They've got to put down distractions. They've got to pay attention and understand the responsibility they have as drivers. They've got to buckle their seatbelt because, again, nobody ever leaves the house intending to have an accident, but they happen way too frequently. And if you're not buckled, you're half again as likely to be a severe injury or fatality. So buckle up, put down distractions, pay attention to what's in front of you. Commissioner Freymiller, one of your focus areas, observe the posted speed limit, please, and really be careful out there because it's going to take all of us working together to make a difference in these numbers that we're seeing. And every accident is tragic. It has an effect not only on the individual that might have been a fatality or severe injury, it has an effect on their families. It has an effect on business, and we need all the help we can get to try to bring those numbers down and reverse them. Because Commissioner Grimsley, it is inexcusable that we will accept 47,000 fatality accidents across this country, and we have to do something about it. And part of that is continuing to invest in the infrastructure. So, with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll close, and I appreciate the Commission's indulgence this morning. I know that was a little bit long-winded on my part, but lots of important subject matter that we've talked about.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Any further questions? All right. If no commissioners have other comments, I'd hear a motion for item 68, which is adjournment.
So moved, Dyson.
So moved, Dyson. Do I have a second?
Second, Alexander.
Second, Mr. Alexander. The secretary will call the roll.
Mr. Coburn.
Coburn, yes.
Mr. Grimsley.
Grimsley, yes.
Mr. Freymiller.
Freymiller, yes.
Mr. Dyson.
Dyson, yes.
Mr. Alexander.
Alexander, yes.
Mr. LaForge.
Yes, LaForge, yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes. The vote's unanimous. We are adjourned.